Oh man, thank you guys, everybody who participated this morning. Jim, great songs. Alicia leaned over to me and said that the one, The Home So Beautiful, was written by somebody who went to church here at Reedland. That is amazing. That is really cool. And thank you for Craig. Craig had volunteered months ago. He said, when you read the passage about telling wives to submit, I want to be the one to read it. I said, okay, we'll schedule that one. So you finally got to, Craig. Appreciate it. I'm going to have to preach a long time because when the sermon ends, he's going to find me. I'm in trouble. All right. I got back late last night. I was involved in some of the background with Winterfest this year, which was kind of fun. And so I went down and Darren went with me. We drove Thursday and spent a couple of days down there ahead of time. And so we came back last night because we had to take the musical artists to the airport at 5 o'clock. If you've ever been to Gatlinburg on a Saturday night, you're not going from Knoxville back into Gatlinburg on a Saturday night. It would have been midnight before we got there. So we said, we're just going to go on home after that. And so I get to be here with you this morning. But I did bring you a gift, a funny picture of Gene from Winterfest. So we got a couple pictures here I want to show you real quick. This is our group. They always take a picture by the Gatlinburg sign. I love it because you can never even see the Gatlinburg sign. So I'm not sure why we don't just take a picture of them on the street, but they were so excited. There were actually, I think, 31 of us or 32 of us down there. That's why it's kind of light this morning. But it is so cool because every year I've ever gone, and I think I've figured up, I've been to 28 in the last 31 years down there. And every time I've ever gone as an adult, people come up and they know not to do it. They know it's a dumb thing to do. They say, how many kids did you bring? Which is a terrible question to ask because one year I brought 3 and everybody asked me that and I went, 3? And they said, well, if you need me as a reference, then you can have me. I was like, it doesn't matter how many you bring. It matters that you have a great time and are with them. But it's so cool is people say, how many kids did you bring? And I say, well, we brought about 15 or 16, but we brought 30 people. And everybody goes, wow, because it's amazing that a church has that many adults that want to be involved in the lives of their kids. It's really a unique thing. And so it's really, really cool. And actually, I think the kids are the chaperones because if you look at the adults that went, they're the ones that are having more fun. So that's really cool. Let's go to the next picture here. Grant told kids that if enough of them came, he would bleach his hair. And so on Friday night late, all the kids gathered around and Katrina bleached his hair. She was terrified that she was going to mess it up. I'm like, mess it up? I mean, what? So that was kind of fun. And then this is the picture. This is your gift right here. There it is. I'm not on Facebook, but Ella, can you make that his profile picture? Is that possible? I mean, you'll try. You got to understand, Gene is a fish in water down there. I mean, he just loves being around the kids, and I told the Bible class, I said, he's an OG. I mean, Jeff Walling is calling him up on stage to lead prayers and stuff. I mean, he goes way back with some of those guys. He loves it so much, and it's really a neat thing. So they're having a great time. Pray for them to get back. They're probably getting on the road right now. They're going to be back this evening, but just pray for them as they travel. And Ryan and Grant and several others have worked really hard to make sure all the logistics are taken care of. Darren cooked for them. Jerry helped cook. It's just really, really neat to see everybody stepping up and helping in those ways. Today, we've been studying so far this year. This theme is Overflow. And just to kind of recap, I mean, this is a big idea, and we're going to have this idea all year. We're going to move to other series. We're going to integrate in other ways. But as we've started off just looking at what this big idea means, I want to remind us, it kind of means several different things. One is that we want to be a people that are so filled with God's Spirit that it overflows into other people's lives, right? We also want His Spirit to overflow from us in praise and worship. There will be people who are praising God and worshiping Him. We want it to overflow in obedience. We want to become more obedient with each passing day, with each passing hour. We want to say, God, where are the areas that I may not even know that I'm not being obedient to? We want to increase in our obedience. And we want it to overflow in our witness. We want to become more passionate about sharing the gospel with the lost. But we also want to do this not just personally. We want to overflow as a church. We want to be a church that overflows into our community. We want to overflow with service, finding needs, addressing them, helping people, feeding people who are hungry. I love that we mentioned the blessing box this morning. Bringing food to put in that, finding ways to serve through PCM or Starfish. Not just waiting for the church to have an opportunity, but finding ways, all of us, to serve in our community. We want to overflow with love. We want to be a place where people know, hey, if people from that Reedland church, or forget that, people from the church, wherever God's people are meeting, that they overflow with love into this community. And we want to overflow with truth. We want to be able to stand on the truth, even when it's not popular, even when it's, not politically correct. We want to be able to stand on the truth and say, we follow God's truth, no matter what. And all those things together create this overflowing, right? Create this sense that we are a people who are God's people, and we're not satisfied with just showing up and checking a box and being at church. We want to be overflowing in our lives to this community. So we started all that the first week by talking about how we need to back up, and if we're going to overflow, we need to think, are we even ready to receive? Or is our cup ready to receive what God's pouring out? Because it can't even overflow until we're ready to receive it to begin with. And so if you remember, we held our hands out. Imagine that we're holding a cup, and whatever we have in it that's blocking the space that God wants to fill, let's just pour that out and get rid of it. We talked about our witness overflowing, our families overflowing, being part of a community that's overflowing. Today, we're going to narrow that focus in a little bit to go kind of to a more specific thing. And we're going to talk about having overflowing marriages. And so, before I jump into this, I want to say, I think this is very important that it's said. Sometimes this is taken for granted, and I think it's very important that it's said. Marriage is not the only expression of Christian community or faithfulness given in the Bible. It is an error. It is an error for us to assume, imply, or directly teach that faithfulness as a Christian looks like marriage. There are other expressions, and particularly Paul extols the value of singleness. Paul elevates singleness and says, if you are single for the Lord, or if you're single and decide to use your singleness for the Lord, that actually puts you at an advantage in the kingdom of God because you have a freedom to serve in ways that family obligations may not let you. And so whereas it's not good for man to be alone, marriage is a good thing, we want faithful marriages and faithful families that raise faithful children. For those among us who are single, maybe you've never been married, maybe you've previously been married, maybe you're a widow or a widower, God calls you to a faithfulness that is beautiful. And it is not lesser in any way than marriage. And I think that's really important for us to understand. Marriage is not superior, but we do need to spend some time talking about marriage because it is, and I'm going to use a word carefully, normative. So when I mean that marriage is the normative experience, that doesn't mean that it's normal and something else is weird. That's not what normative means. What normative means is that it is numerically the norm. So the vast majority of people will experience marriage at some point in their lives. According to data from the United Nations, depending on which country, somewhere between 70% and up as high as 95% of all adults will marry at some point in their life. So the vast majority of people will experience marriage in their life. And that being the case, marriage is what would be considered the normative experience. So we do need to talk about it, but in talking about it, we are not elevating it above singleness. So God's plan for marriage, which is from people that are biologically unique, they're not from the same family and they're not from the same gender, that they would come together and they would form a new family and a new person where they become one body, one flesh before God in a committed, covenant, sexually monogamous union. A lot of people are going to do that. And so we need to talk about what God says about that. Now, if you've never been married, you don't plan to get married, you were married, you're widowed, I got good news for you. Our text today from Ephesians 5 really isn't about marriage at all. It's really using marriage as an illustration of a greater truth. We just think that it's all about marriage, and we like to read it in weddings. But our text today is for everyone because what it's really about is about mystery, community, and even civil disobedience, but all in the context of marriage. In fact, the whole text is presented in a way where it's really kind of a surprise. And I kind of want you to hang on to that word surprise because we're going to come back to that. But first, let me read the text again from Ephesians 5:21 and following. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands as you do the Lord. For husbands, they're the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so the wives should also submit to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and they care for their own body, just as Christ does for the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Often, this text is read with the command for wives to submit to their husbands and husbands to love their wives. And some people have any trouble getting past that. Like, that's it. That's the not PC part right there, right? There's even a lot of movement right now in marriage vows to strike the word submit. A lot of people don't want to use the word. Or in the traditional vows to obey. And they're like, we want to take that out. We want to take that out. Because it just doesn't feel culturally appropriate. There's also, of course, one of my wife's favorite phrases, and I don't disagree with it at all, is happy wife, happy life. Right? You know, it's a great motto to live by. That comes right out of this text. It really does. I think it's in the New Marriage Translation, but it's right there, you know. It says, nobody doesn't care for their own body. Nobody would deprive their own body of food and cleaning. You love your wife like you love your body. You want a happy life? Make your wife happy. Love her, care for her, right? Like, so there's these principles that are in there that are kind of swirling around in our society, and we want to cherry pick them. We want to be like, well, we take that one, but we'll say it, happy wife, happy life, but we don't really want to use that one because it's not culture. So there's a lot of noise around this. And so a lot of times this passage kind of gets stopped at the front door and squeezed into some boxes that we already have, and that's it. And when we do that, we completely miss what's actually going on in this passage. Another way this is often preached, and it's not necessarily wrong, but it's incomplete, is this is often preached like this. We should all do these things. We should submit, we should love, we should respect, care for each other, because then we're going to have these fantastic marriages, and the world full of broken marriages will see that, and they'll say, where'd you get this great marriage? And we'll say we got it from God, and then they'll want to go to God. So it's kind of like, you know, you're looking for a car, and you find this incredible deal on a brand new car, and you drive it to your neighborhood, and your neighbors come over and go, where'd you get that amazing car? And you're like, oh, it's fantastic, I got a great deal. Where'd you get the great deal? And you're like, I got it down at Parkway Ford, and now everybody's going to go to Parkway Ford. Well, it's not untrue. I mean, obviously, if you have a great marriage and it's because of your obedience to God that you're doing this, that you're choosing in that marriage and your marriage is great because of it, that's a great witness. And if people see that, hopefully they will say, boy, I want some of that. Where'd you get it? We got it from God. But again, that's only a piece. Often this passage is presented that way as if it's transactional. Right? As if it's like, if you do this, this, and this, you'll have the perfect marriage, which means that your marriage will be a witness, and you'll be killing two birds with one stone, because you'll be obeying God in your marriage, and you'll also be obeying him in evangelism, and that takes care of itself. Well, that's really a transactional way to look at it, and the passage isn't speaking transactionally. The passage is speaking mysteriously. And so we don't deny that a marriage can be a good witness, but we don't want to stop there, and we don't want to just shove this passage in that box. It's a good point, but it's not the point. It's not the main point that Paul's trying to make. I will say that our world does struggle with marriages. One of the things that's often quoted is that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and I actually think that makes the problem worse, because if you actually break down the statistic and look, it's actually exactly what it says. 50% of all marriages end in divorce. But, and it's been a little while since I checked, I probably should have checked before the sermon to brush it up, but traditionally, new marriages, only about 30 to 35% of first marriages end in divorce. So about 65 to 70% of marriages stay together till death do us part. But we do have people in our society that are serial marriagers, serial divorcers. And oftentimes, there are people who will get married and divorced 2, 3, 4, even 5 times, and that's aggregated in the statistic, which means that 50% of all marriages end in divorce. But it's kind of, to me, more hopeful to understand that the truth is 60 to 70% of first marriages last. That's really good. But in a world where there's a lot of brokenness surrounding marriage, it is important that we do understand that it should be a prayer. It's been our prayer since before we got married that we would have a marriage that would be so good that the world would notice and that would point to God. That's what we want. We want it to be a witness. But again, it's not the main point of the passage. The main point is mystery and surprise. Now, surprise is one of my favorite words. I love surprises. Now, I don't love surprises like everything's fine on my car, I just got it checked out by the mechanic, and the next day my transmission falls out. That's not the kind of surprise I like. But the kind of surprise like I walk into my office and there's a banana bread or a muffin or a card on my desk from somebody that just says, I just really appreciate you. I like that kind of surprise. That's a nice surprise, right? I like stories that have surprises in them. I was a big fan of M. Night Shyamalan when he first came along and did movies like The Sixth Sense and Unbroken because they always had surprise endings. I think the biggest surprise about M. Night Shyamalan is if you go look at all of his movies where, they're kind of scary thrillers and they have this surprise ending, and you go back and look at his first movie, it was Stuart Little. That was a little bit of a surprise. The first movie he directed was Stuart Little. So that was a surprise to me. But I like those kind of surprises. If you've been watching the Olympics this week, there's been some surprises in the Olympics. I think right out the gate we have Lindsey Vonn, who comes back from an injury 9 days earlier, rupturing her ACL, and she's in the race, and then what happens? She catches the first gate, has this horrible accident, breaks her leg in multiple places. That's a tragic surprise, but it certainly was a surprise. Then you've got Norwegian biathlete Sturla Holm Liagard, who won the bronze in the biathlon. And, you think, hey, you work your whole life for this, you win a medal, you get on the podium, and they put the mic in your face. What are you going to say in that moment? Well, nobody expected this. They said, you just won the bronze medal. How do you feel? And he started crying and said, I feel awful because I cheated on my girlfriend, and she's not here to celebrate this for me. And maybe she'll understand how sorry I am and take me back. And everybody went, this is embarrassing. That was a surprise. Or there was the gold medal winner in the ski long jump, which is also called ski flying. And if you know what I'm talking about, these guys come down that hill and they lean forward and it is terrifying. Like I've skied my whole life growing up. I skied black diamonds in Colorado, and that sport terrifies me. Like just watching it terrifies me. And this guy won the gold medal, and that in itself was a surprise because he had never placed higher than like 20th in competition and then 6th in World Cup competition. Like he was a total outsider, and he won gold with his perfect runs. But then the even bigger surprise was he's scared of heights. He had posted online a few months ago that he had to sit out a competition because he is terrified of heights. And you're like, what got you started in ski flying, right? So, that's a surprise. So, in our world, there are surprises around us all the time, right? Like we're used to being surprised. And it's not like a jump scare. It's not like anytime somebody surprises us, we almost have a heart attack. There are pleasant surprises. There are surprises that we seek out. Some people like to have surprise parties for people. Like we're used to this idea of surprise. And yet when we look at the Bible, we're like, I don't want any surprises here. Like, I don't want to read the Bible today and go, oh my gosh, I've been sinning my whole life and didn't know it. Like, that's not a good surprise. I want to read the Bible and be like, oh, the way I thought about this my whole life was wrong, and that other Christian group was really right. Like, we don't want that surprise, right? We don't want surprises in the Bible. And yet God is huge. I like to use the illustration that if I got an ant and I tried to teach an ant calculus, I couldn't do it because I don't know calculus, but if I tried to teach an ant calculus, I could sit there for days and days and days trying to teach it to the ant. In the end, the ant has heard all of it, doesn't know any calculus. God can sit there and try and explain himself to me for my entire life, and at the end, I'm an ant. I don't have the capacity to truly understand him. And if God is huge and God is a mystery, then why would I think that I can have all the right answers? Why would I think that I could have it perfectly figured out and everybody else in history was wrong, but I've got it right? And so my posture becomes, God, surprise me. I want to be surprised by you, God, because I know that I don't know you fully. And I want to know you more. And maybe by the end of my life, I'll have a thimbleful of understanding of who God is, and that would be an ocean to me. Right? And so when we look at this text, we want to come with that posture. And that posture starts right all the way back in verse 21, the very first verse. That verse, when this passage that we're always saying is about marriage, is about marriage, is about marriage, that verse starts by saying, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That verse is defining everything that comes after it. In fact, the verb form there, the verb is the same in that sense as what's going to follow next when it says, wives, submit to your husbands. Wives, submit to your husbands is flowing from the command that we all should submit to each other. The error is to say wives are supposed to submit to their husbands, but husbands don't submit to their wives. No, it starts out by saying submit to one another. And that's not qualified by marriage. In other words, Paul is saying, hey, church, submit to one another. Here's an example. In marriage, do it this way. This passage is starting out with the idea of the surprise, this isn't about marriage. Marriage is an illustration about the way we're supposed to posture ourselves within the community of God. Now, in the Greek and Roman world, there were a lot of what are called household codes. In these household codes, they would say, like, women submit to the husband, children submit to the father, slaves submit to the master. And there were various published household codes that were used and often enforced in society. So Aristotle, a famous name, he had famously in Politics, his book, written a household code. This is what it said. Of household management, we have seen there are three parts. One is the rule of the master over slaves, which has been discussed already, another of a father, and the third of a husband. A husband and father, we saw, rules the wife and children, both free, but the rule differs. The rule over his children being royal, while the ruler over the wife is based on natural constitution. For although there may be exceptions to the order of nature, the male is by nature fitter for the command than the female, just as the elder and full-grown is superior to the younger and more immature. So that was a common household code in the world that Paul's writing into. Here's another one by Josephus. The woman is in all things inferior to the man. Let her accordingly be obedient, not for her humiliation, but that she may be directed, for God has given authority to the man. Of all the household codes that we know of that were circulating at the time of the writing of the New Testament, there is not or never had been a single one that called for the idea of mutual submission. This was a completely new idea that was unheard of. In fact, in the Roman world, the actual law governing the Roman Empire was one who gave complete legal authority to the pater familias, or the father of the family. In other words, the husband and father had total legal authority and control over his wife and children, even to the point of life and death. So a Roman man, or a man living in the Roman Empire, had the right to sell his wife and children into slavery or to pay his debts if he wanted to. He had the right to punish them even to the point of death with no recourse from the law. He was given absolute authority in his own home. And this is the world that Paul is writing into. And so when Paul says, hey, I'm going to talk about husbands and wives, children, and later slaves, he's signaling to the people that he's writing a household code. This is not lost on them. They're very familiar with household codes. And he's saying, guess what? As Christians, we're going to have our own household code. We're not going to use the Roman household code. We're not going to use the Greek household code. We're not going to use even Josephus' Jewish household code. We're going to have our own. And here's where it starts. Submit to each other. And yes, Romans say that the wives should submit to the husband. Yeah, they should, as you submit to each other. But guess what? The husband has an obligation too. An obligation to love the wife. And not just love the wife, but love her to the point of sacrificing his own self like Jesus did. That a husband should be willing to lay down his own life. If there's only enough food in the house for one, she gets it, not you. You should willingly sacrifice yourself for your wife, just like Jesus did. Yeah, I got to say, guys, which is the bigger obligation? To submit or to sacrifice to the point of death? In the Roman world, this is unheard of. This is completely unheard of. In the Roman world, if there's only enough food in the house for one, dad gets it. And from a humanistic point of view, that kind of makes sense. Because dad's going to be the one out who's got to go out the next day and work. And so he needs to have the strength. He needs the food so he can go out and work. Paul doesn't see it that way. Paul says in the economy of Christianity, you sacrifice yourself for others. And so the bigger obligation actually becomes on the husband and father. This is why I said that this passage even dips into the idea of civil disobedience. There's a very real sense in what Paul is asking the Christians to do here is to defy Rome, to defy Jerusalem, to defy Athens, to say the powers of the world, the wisdom of the world sees it one way, but we will see it another way. We will be subversive for the sake of the gospel. So the idea of mutual submission is a huge surprise. But there's a second surprise in this passage that might even be bigger than the first one. As I said from the beginning, this text is often used to talk about having good marriages so that the people around us will see God. But the passage is actually framing that in reverse. It's not saying that if you want to understand Jesus and the church, you should understand marriage. It's saying that if you want to understand marriage, you should understand Jesus and the church. So when we say, hey, we should have good marriages so that people will see God, again, that's not a bad thing. But if the template for understanding God's love for the church is the best marriage among us, it's still not a good template. So we're going to vote real quick, and we're going to figure out who has the best marriage here. You get a couple of votes. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. But I just want you to think, in your mind, in your life, the best marriage you've ever seen. Now, if you want brownie points, lean over to your husband or wife right now and say, it's us. I just want you to think about it. Think about somebody. Now, Alicia used to tell me, I never knew him, about Carl Keller. And that he would say, I'll take care of her till I can't walk anymore. Then I guess I'll crawl. And then I'll take care of her till I can't crawl anymore. And then I guess that'll be it. That was Carl Keller, right? And she said that was a beautiful, beautiful example for her. Okay? I didn't know him. But I know some people like that. I saw some people growing up that I thought, man, the depth of that love, the depth of that sacrifice, the depth of that relationship. You think of somebody like that? The best marriage you've ever seen is a terrible template for understanding Jesus. If that is the way we explain who God is to the world, it will always fall short. It will always fall short. Now, it's good that people might see that and say, we want to worship the Father, we want to know God, I want what you got. But the point of this passage is not look at a human marriage and that helps us understand God. The point is look at God, look at Christ, and that will show you what marriage should be like. That will provide the template. So we have to reverse the understanding here. It's pretty much said at the end of the passage. For this reason, this is verse 31. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. Paul is trying to make a point here, and the point is that we as the church have to submit to each other. Later in the book of Ephesians, he's going to talk about the whole church is growing together with every supporting bone and ligament and the hand. I mean, there's all this stuff that he's going to talk about the way the church works together. And here he says, submit to one another. Here's an example. In your own home, in your own marriage, submit to your husband, love your wife, do it like Christ loved the church, care for your children, do these things. Here's this household code. But you know what, guys, that's really just an illustration. What I'm trying to point you to here is I'm not saying submit to each other like you would a marriage. I'm trying to say submit to each other like Christ does for the church. Look to Jesus, look to his example, look to his love, and constantly try to do that in your relationship with each other, whether you're married, whether you're a parent, whether you're single, or whether you're a slave and a master. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine walking into church on Sunday and all week you are a slave in somebody's household, and on Sunday you walk into the church and maybe you're an elder and that person's not? How's that going to work? And they had some real challenges like that. How do you do that? You look to Jesus. You look to Jesus. Marriage itself is a daily dying to self. It's choosing someone else over yourself. It's giving up what you want for what they want. It's caring about their needs more than your needs. And so it is a great example for us to look to try to understand this profound mystery of God. But when we want to see the real thing, we've got to look to God. If we want to know what marriage should look like, stop looking at human couples with good marriages and start looking at the marriage between Christ and the church as your example. Look at what Jesus does for the church, protecting her honor, protecting her dignity, protecting her purity, loving her in her messiness, patiently waiting for her, showing her unending love, respect, and service. Because if we look even at the best marriages around us, it's a little easy to say, well, they have a good marriage, but he's still a jerk sometimes, so it's probably okay that I am. Or, man, they have a good marriage, but, they were sleeping together before they got married, so it's probably okay if I do. Look to Christ in the church as the example. If you're married and all you do is you find yourself complaining about your spouse all the time, stop. If you lie to your spouse or disrespect them, stop. If you flirt with people other than your spouse, stop. If you spend money that your spouse doesn't want you to spend or doesn't know that you spend, stop. If you're looking at porn, stop. If you're not married yet and you're living together with someone or sleeping with someone who you're not married to, stop now. Because all of those behaviors are things that you would never see Jesus doing in his marriage to us, the church. They're selfish, they're self-serving, and they'll only cause you more pain. And I know saying stop just sounds like so easy. It's behavior modification. It's the lowest level of change. I get that. But the truth is some of our behaviors need to be modified because they harm you and they harm the people around you. And they can feel good and they can feel right. They can feel like everybody's doing it and it's no big deal. But they are a big deal. And they do hurt us. But God won't abandon us. He understands. He knows that we're human. He knows that we're flawed. He's not going to condemn you for messing up. But he understands that those things hurt you in the long run. It may take time to heal things, to change habits, to change circumstances. There may be difficult decisions that have to be made. But God's going to walk with you through those things because he loves you. And that's actually exactly what we see Jesus doing with the church. When you look at Jesus in the church, you see a marriage that overflows. It overflows into us today. It overflows into the church throughout all time. And it overflows into the world around us. And it overflows not just with love, but with adoration. Not just with commitment, but with self-sacrifice. Not just with mutual submission, but with mutual respect. This is the mystery. This is the surprise. That the God in heaven is giving us a picture in himself of how to have the best and deepest marriage relationships and community relationships within the body of Christ by imitating him. So, married, single, divorced, widowed, whatever your status, this lesson is for you and for me. Because if we are to be like Christ and the church, what are we to do? Well, it's all the way back in verse 21. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. We can overflow to the world when we submit to each other in our relationships. All of our relationships, including marriage. So, are you honoring God in your marriage? If you're not married, are you honoring God with your body? Are you honoring God in your relationships? Are you submitting to others out of reverence for Christ? These are the questions to ask ourselves. Now let me end with a blessing. God, as we go forth today, may the single honor you and be honored for living in a place where they have the freedom to follow you as they honor you with their bodies. May the friends and neighbors honor you and be honored by each other as they mutually submit to each other out of reverence for Christ. May the widows and the widowers, the divorced and the brokenhearted honor you and be honored by you as they grieve, heal, and hope for your comfort. And may the married honor you and their spouses by loving, respecting, and mutually submitting to each other, choosing to serve rather than be served, choosing to give rather than to take, choosing to seek you and overflow your love into their marriage and into the world around them. Let's continue in song.